So let's hit the one last one. If you can just kind of walk us through this this chapter, which I'd never really thought about, but this kind of connection between transgenderism and maybe some of the dangers there, and kind of lean into that, but then also then how that plays into this pedophilia, right? And how the very same logic is allowing both things to take place, which of course no one wants to think about, as you said.
Sure.
Very diabolical, but
Sure. So, and I want to be clear too that what I am not saying that the connection is not that all transgender people are also pedophiles.
Right. Yeah.
So that's not the argument. The argument is that on the basis that we justify transgender ideology and affirm transgenderism, like in our schools and for young people and in the medical establishment with like gender affirming care, the basis on which we do that, like the philosophical basis, is the same basis on which pedophiles are going to be able to justify their pedophilia, and we see that most obviously in the way the transgender movement uses consent, right? This idea of consent. It used to be that we prohibited certain things, not because, not on the basis of consent, right? But on the basis to an appeal to objective moral reality, right? Mm-hmm. That certain things were wrong, and we can use our reason to know they are wrong, and so we prohibit them in law, right? The shift that we see within like the transgender sort of like movement or the transgender debates, right, is that as long as there's consent, then this stuff should be allowed. And I'm thinking specifically with regards to minors, right? Mm-hmm. And and this is the kind of debate. Sometimes you take a step back and you're like, how are we even talking about
what are we
this?
Talking about?
Like, what are we talking about this? Right. But what we're talking about is, just to use clear language about it and to call it what it is, we're talking about sterilization, castration, mutilation of children, right? Who in the name of this gender ideology that purports that you can, if you're a boy, you can become a girl, or not that you can just become a girl, that you really are a girl. And there's this disconnection between your identity and your body. And so you have to modify your body to match your identity. In some ways, it's a very Gnostic kind of philosophy. But the justification for allowing these things to be done to children is that the children are consenting to it, and not only are they consenting to it, but we have to do this for their health. Like if we don't allow them to have access to gender affirming care and to go on like puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and get a double mastectomy or to be castrated. And I hate to even talk about this stuff, right? Because it's stomach turning, but it's real, it's happening. So we have to talk about it. And the connection with pedophilia is simply this, that if a 12-year-old can consent to getting a double mastectomy or to being permanently sterilized, there's not much that a 12-year-old can't consent to, right? On what basis are you going to say that a 12-year-old can consent to these medical procedures, but can't consent to sexual relations with an older person, right? It doesn't make any sense. It's not reasonable. It's not rational. But again, pagan morality disfigures reason. Reason belongs to Christianity. It belongs to a Christian worldview and a transcendent moral order that coheres, right? And we're used to, as Christians and as just Westerners, we're used to like worldviews and moral systems that cohere, right? Because that's our inheritance from Christianity. But the pagan moral order does not cohere, right? Because it's based on these things we've been talking about: force and will and coercion. And so it can change. There can be, it's relative, right? Power is relative. And so the basis on which we as a society are justifying gender affirming care for minors is the same basis that academics in academia right now, and I go through this in the book, are working to justify pedophilia. And of course, they don't call it pedophilia, just like the transgender advocates don't call it castration or mutilation. They call it gender affirming care. They have these euphemisms.
Mm-hmm.
The pedophile advocates call it minor attracted persons, or MAPS, right? That's how they talk. That's the jargon that they have, because of course pedophile has, negative connotations, and they don't want to they view pedophiles as the victims here. They are stigmatized. We need to recognize their identities, right? So you can see where this is going. It's very familiar territory by now. We need to recognize
this is who they are.
Unchosen sexual orientation, and that so that they're non-offending pedophiles, right? It's not that hard to jump from there to a world in which a pedophile comes forward with their underage lover and says, our union, our relationship is consensual. It is a persistent and deep part of both of our identities. And we demand that our identities be affirmed and recognized and decriminalized. And they're going to argue that on the same basis that the transgender movement argued for their identities to be recognized, on the same basis that the gay marriage advocates argued for their marriages to be recognized and their identities to be recognized. And there is, with our current moral framework and understanding of public morality and law, cannot stop that from happening. That is going to happen. So again, part of why I wrote the book was to get people to wrap their minds around this and start thinking about it seriously. If you're against that, even if you're not like a super on fire Christian or a super conservative, if you're against that, you need to start thinking about how we got to this point and what it is that we can do to stop this from happening. How do we go back? Where did we go wrong? Right? Think back. How did this become inevitable? These atrocities, these abominations, frankly. How is it that we're having these debates? And where do we go from here? I think a lot of people are not there. They just do not accept what is happening and what's going to happen. And I'm trying to get them to accept that. And so I'm not giving them a program for how to save America, because that's not the purpose of the book. A lot of books like this will end with these 10 steps and you can save America. I don't end on that note, because the task at hand, I think, is to get people to accept what's happening.